Hi there. Welcome to New Tracks Modeling. New Tracks is an exciting new digital opportunity to obtain mentoring to help you improve your modeling. You will meet talented modelers and manufacturers from all over the world who share their model building skills and artistic advice. Improve your modeling and increase the confidence in your modeling efforts. Share your building efforts with fellow modelers and have some fun doing it. The shows are live on Zoom and YouTube, so be sure to join in and ask your questions. Now here is New Tracks founder and your host, Jim Kello, MMR.
Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. We really do appreciate it. Hope you come back often. Tell your friends about us. Before we start the show, I want to introduce Father Ron Walters for the show's prayer. Father Walters, welcome.
Creator of the world, as modelers and makers, we recognize the intricacy and the beauty of our world. We thank you for the vision and the artistry you have given us. Continue to bless us with your creative spirit. Amen.
Thank you so much, Father. We really appreciate everything that you do for our show. And now I want to run the video for the sponsor for our show, who is Brennan's Model Railroading, owned by Dennis Brennan.
For over 25 years, Brennan's Model Railroading has been offering unique products for the O-scale market. Our flagship product, Brennan's Better Ballast, was an instant hit and continues to be the industry leader. Its prototypical size and natural color blend of real crushed granite make it the choice for discerning modelers. Since then, we've developed a complementary line of natural ground cover materials. Additionally, we offer craftsman kits that anyone can build with complete photographically illustrated instructions that assume you've never done this before. The Sonky Wanky Coffee Company is the latest and the fourth kit to be added to our ongoing and highly popular limited edition Ellison Tribute series. These kits take Ellison's scratch-built iconic structures to a new level with Dennis' spin. The idea being that if Frank were alive today, this is how we would build these models using modern methods and materials. Use the QR code to visit our website.
I think most people know that both the S-Scale Association, the National Association of S-Gauges, and the O-Scale organization, O-Scale Central, are both supporters and are financially supporting our show. Dennis Brennan, who's a member of the O-Scale organization, was recently named the person that is the liaison to the manufacturers in O-Scale for the O-Scale Central. So congratulations, Dennis. I hope that you're very successful, because I do believe that this is an organization that the O-Scale manufacturers should definitely consider participating in order to have a much stronger voice in the operation of the organization than if only a few manufacturers are members. So congratulations again, Dennis. Unfortunately, I can't tell you who has the same for the S-Scale Association, but if anybody knows and could let me know, I would appreciate it. Now I'd like to go to Chris Corse and Greg Cassidy to talk about the upcoming My Bill on the 16th of October. Greg, Chris?
Thanks, Jim. All right. The next My Build is the October Challenge, October 16th, and it actually has a theme. This one is layouts, finished, in progress, whatever you're working on. Switching layouts, modules, dioramas, that sort of thing. Just doesn't have to be anything big. It just needs to be on something that's got maybe a little bit of scenery. Maybe it's not scenery yet. Maybe you're looking for a scenery idea. I don't know, but anyway, please give me send your photos to me, railrunner130@hotmail.com by October 13th. that way it'll give us plenty of time to get those slides onto the slideshow. How are you doing, Greg?
Fine. Something that I'd like to add to what Chris is saying. If you're sending in a few photos of your layout, go ahead and throw in a Word file or something that has a couple lines of description of what your layout is, what scale it is, what area it represents, whether you're freelancing or prototypical, and just a little something about it, just in case you're not there when he's showing the pictures. Because you never know when a storm's going to come through and take out your internet or something. But I look forward to this one. I'd like to see a lot of pictures of different layouts. And it wouldn't hurt if you want to throw in a picture of your track plan so we can kind of see where all those tracks go.
Yeah, exactly. Good point, Greg. Yeah, this is one of the new challenges that you guys voted for, so it's up to you guys to make it happen. Please participate in it. Doesn't have to be anything elaborate. Just I threw up a few photos of stuff that I've been working on. Actually, if you see that photo in the upper right corner, that was the part of the layout that MB Klein had in their store before they closed it. Anyway. Please send us your photos by October 13th, and we'll get them on the show. The next regular My Build will be November 20th. So I will turn it back over to you, Jim.
Oh, thanks so much, Greg, Chris. I appreciate it so very much. The October newsletter is closed out. It's full. And Martin is doing a fantastic job with our newsletter. I think the one last month was almost 50 pages, if not a few more. Can't believe we've got that many comments and people contributing to the newsletter. It's not even a year old yet, but I'm very pleased about it, and can't thank Martin enough for the effort that he's putting into making it the success that I think it is. Again, if you have any comments or suggestions, please let Martin know about it. You know, it's funny, but people that write articles, the one thing that they always seem to complain about is they have no idea if anybody ever reads them. They have no idea if people ever comment about them or anything else. And that's why I try to always make a statement in anything that I write or try to get other people to do. And that's give the author a comment. Whether you like it or not, it doesn't make any difference. At least he knows you read it. And that's what's important. Getting paid for it is trivial. Compared to the time and the effort that the person has put in trying to write it. For our newsletter, that doesn't even apply. I mean, it can be a couple of sentences and a photo would be fine. Martin just needs to know that, yeah, you appreciate the effort that he puts in, you appreciate the newsletter, you want to see it continue, or you think it's a waste of time and just stop it. Hobby doesn't need it, so why bother? That's fine. Tell us that. There's no point in us wasting our time producing something that nobody wants. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. From the very first, what New Tracks has been all about is throwing a lot of stuff against the wall and continue doing what seems to stick. If it doesn't stick, we've stopped it. And we've stopped a bunch of stuff because nobody seemed to care about it. And we were having trouble getting people to even participate in it. So if the newsletter isn't what you want, tell Martin, we don't have to do it. We do it because we think it's needed. We do it because we think that the information that Martin is putting in it is very valuable, and we hope that you're enjoying it. But we need to know from you whether we're smoking something or off our medications or whatever, and nobody cares about it and thinks we're wasting our time. If so, we'll just stop it. No big deal. So that's the newsletter. The scholarship. We need your donations. Doesn't make any difference whether it's $5, $100, $10,000. It doesn't make any difference what the amount is. We just think that the scholarships are important. And we think that we're of the age that encouraging the younger people in our hobby to participate in our hobby, one way we can do that is by holding out the hope that they can win one of our scholarships. But in order to do that, we need donations. And having small donations from a lot of people, I think is fantastic. So if you're considering donating, you can go to our website, newtracksmodeling.com/scholarship, And you can find it very easily how to submit $5. You can use a credit card. You can do it one time. You can do it more than one. Whatever you want to do is fine. But your name is included then in the volunteers that have participated with the scholarship. And I'd like to see Martin have to fill up a couple of pages in the newsletter of the individual modelers who are participating. And I don't care how much you give. I think it's important that we show the community that there are modelers that are interested enough in our hobby and the future of our hobby to encourage the young modelers of today to join in and become involved long-term in becoming a model railroader. So with that said, now I've got two other small announcements and we'll start the show. One is the Sunshine Region, which I'm a member of, which is in Florida, is holding their convention October the 10th to the 12th in Ocala, Florida. And assuming Ocala is not blown away by this storm that's coming through tomorrow, it's going to be a wonderful convention. It's got a lot of good clinics that now people have signed up to give, a lot of great layouts that are available for you to see, and I hope you'll consider going. If you're interested, the website is www.nmrasunshineregion.org. Next, the other announcement I have is about the recent narrow gauge convention. And in October and November, we're going to be doing specific segments about the convention, one of them on the contest and the other about different layouts and clubs and organizations that were involved in the convention. And Phil Edholm is here this evening to try to give you a little bit.
These are some examples of what you're going to see. This is on the East Broad Top. This is a ride on a one-cylinder gasoline speeder. And this is a very large O-scale layout. It's a 3-rail layout. But this was interesting for some folks. This is an East Broadtop layout that's of an imaginary East Broadtop line, which is incredibly well done. So you see a lot more videos of these, and then we're gonna have a lot of pictures of specific close-ups that Tom and Jeff took. So we get to layouts, we'll probably have, a good 15 minutes on each layout. This is a layout of railroads in Chile done by a Chilean professor at Carnegie Mellon. So join us in October and then November for the EBT tour and the layout tour. So we're going to try to have some very specific segments, have some great content about what was at the convention.
Well, thank you both, you and Tom Farrell, Phil, for doing this and taking the videos and showing it and so forth. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. Well, now let's go to the show. And the first segment is G-Scale Modeling. And our sponsor for this is New Creations, Victorian Railroad Buildings, LLC, owned by Alan Rogers. If we could run that video, please.
Welcome to New Creations Victorian Railroad Buildings, located in Bakersfield, California, 1 hour from the famed Tehachapi Loop. As part of building his model railroad layout, Alan Rogers took photos and made scale drawings of a number of buildings in the Southwest, many of which no longer exist. New Creations Victorian Railroad Buildings has turned these photos and drawings into kits with laser-cut wood, 3D printed components and detailed instructions. We produce kits in HO, O, S, N and G scales. Our O scale kits are compatible with Holiday Village dioramas. You can see our products at train shows or use the QR code to visit our website. We hope you will try our unique kits. They are easy and fun to build, even for beginners. You will enjoy the finished models for many years to come.
And the host for this segment is Steve Bittinger. Unfortunately, Steve has a family emergency and sent me an email about half an hour ago saying apologies, but he just can't make it tonight. So to fill in for him and to give you a flavor of a layout that I think is outstanding in G-scale, Phil at home took some videos of a G-scale layout that was on display at the recent NMRA National Convention in California. So Phil, if you could show us that, please.
Certainly, Jim. Yeah, so I thought this was interesting since we didn't have anything else here tonight. This was a outdoor G-scale layout in a backyard that I thought was pretty amazing. So what you see in the back there is the actual layout that runs basically from about 25 feet from the back of the house, maybe 30 feet, and then runs all the way to the back fence and runs up the back fence, as you can see. And then they've got about a 20-foot wide covered patio area here. And if you look up above, up here, you notice he's got G-scale trains running around here. And this track actually goes into the house. And there's an indoor yard and stuff to park them inside the house. So I thought it was pretty impressive. And the other thing to look at is over here, you got the young man, but look at the control panel he's running to run the trains. So this is kind of another view looking one way and the outside layout. It's a typical kind of, we call it kind of layered garden layout in that it's got multiple levels. And this is a view the other way. And so pretty amazing. And he said actually had a contractor who did some concrete work that he hired. They went on a vacation and they hired him to do the work and came back and they had done the concrete and they were coloring it for the rocks in the back. Thought that was pretty amazing. But I thought that was kind of a nice G-scale layout to just show since we didn't have anything else for tonight. So back to you, Jim.
Well, thank you so very much. Anybody have any questions for Phil about this layout? I thought it was outstanding. Thanks so much, Phil. So now let's go to Jeff Jordan. And here is something Jeff has created, a new way of painting figures that I think I can even master. So Jeff, welcome.
Thank you. Let me share my screen here. And there we go. Share. And so, as I said, calling this figure painting for folks who can't paint figures, myself included. When I started this, I was very much intimidated by figure painting. And with just some videos and more importantly, some experimentation, I've come up with a simplified technique, which though is not super detailed, it provides very acceptable background figures and takes a lot of the intimidation out of painting figures such as the one you see here. And you will indeed see this guy progress through the painting process and ultimately see him completed and on my layout. And again, this is from Aspen Model Works. They make a very high quality O scale figure, which is resin 3D printed. And as you can see, has excellent definition. Looking at the collar on his shirt, the seams on his coveralls, the buttonholes on his jacket, and that he's rather deeply carved which is really important to the technique that I'm showing you, that it really takes advantage of the deeply carved figures. But then to start out, as I mentioned last week, a lot of manufacturers' figures, the pre-painted ones especially, come with mold seams on them, and the manufacturers don't bother to take the mold seams or even the flash off, and so you get some really bad effects in some figures. And so the first part is indeed preparation. And the Aspen Model Works figures are actually quite clean compared to, but if you look at you can see he's got a little bit of something up on his shoulder there, and there's definitely a seam going down the side. We're skipping ahead here. A seam going down the side of his pants, a seam under his sleeve, a little bit of a flash on the tip of the oiler, which all need to be removed. And of course, because it's 3D printed resin material, it's relatively easy to carve. And I just use the edge of an X-Acto blade to get the big chunks off, and then some little metal files to clean them up. But the figure is durable enough that you're not going to destroy him, go easy, knock away anything that doesn't look like a figure. And that's really your important starting point. Next step is, and here's the same fellow, you'll see I've added his arm here, is a holding fixture of some sort. There are a couple of different ways you can do this. Since this guy is going to stand on the layout, putting a pin in his leg works very nicely, because I can then insert that into the scenery, a little bit shorter than that, but for holding purposes while I'm working, you start off with just a little bit of music wire, drill into the sole of his foot there, and you can just insert it by friction, or you can give it a drop of super glue. You can trim it off when you're done if you don't want it, or in my case, in this figure, I keep it for mounting on the layout when he's done. Also, incidentally, you can just hold that little wire as the fixture while you're painting. But what I do is I take a small block of styrofoam, scrap from my scenery building, and just poke that into the little block of styrofoam so that he stands up securely. So when I set him aside to dry, he doesn't fall over on the wet paint, and enables me to turn him as I work. Having said that, here's another holding fixture. This is something I found on Amazon and is used by folks who paint miniature figures regularly. And it comes with some sticky, I think it's almost like clay or putty that goes on that little base there. And then you can stick the figure into it. The extending up on the left-hand side there is a brace for your hand. So you can rotate that brace, you can lean against it, you can lean your brush against it. So it helps eliminate the shakes. The little knurled cap there that the guy is attached to is actually removable, and it comes with several of those. So you can have several figures all stuck to one of those caps and swap them out. And while one dries, put another guy on and work on him. And the handle itself has a magnet in the bottom. So if you have a handy metal surface, the whole holder, you can put it aside and stick it on a magnet or on a metal surface. So it's a handy little thing made for the figure painters and very useful, not very expensive, handy addition to your figure painting efforts. So next, even the resin figures come with some sort of mold release or other preparatory material still on there, or even just the oils from your hands from handling him. So it's important to give all of these guys a little wash off in just dishwater, dish soap, clean them and dry them to give you a really clean surface. You won't find fingerprints appearing in your freshly painted surface. And again, you'll see we've got the oiler there, and also the other guy I showed last week is the engineer. And this is a large chunk of styrofoam that they've been stuck into to spray them with primer. And here, I know a lot of people have a lot of different preferences for primer, but here the primer serves more than just primer. It will actually contribute to the finished visible effect, as you'll see. And therefore, I use the Tamiya primer because it uses an extremely fine pigment and therefore does not hide any of the details, doesn't have any filling properties whatsoever. Some primers are meant to smooth things off and fill in. This does not fill. And so you'll see in later photos that even this guy's buttonholes still show after being sprayed with the primer. It dries very fast. And it, of course, is not water soluble because everything I use after this point will, until I seal the figure, will be a water soluble paint like Vallejo. And so you don't want the primer to start coming off when you start putting water soluble paints on top of the figure. So starting off here, and this is the pretty straightforward process, is my approach to painting these figures is to paint, you know, what I call inside out, the deepest feature first. And so, for example, with this guy, it's going to be his face, because outside of the face, you've got the collar of his shirt and maybe a bandana. And then on top of that, you've got a jacket. And so start with the most recessed color and work your way out. Similarly, I might paint the shoes next, because you see the pants overlap the shoes, and then the jacket will get painted after the pants and after the shirt. So it's always the topmost color working your way out. And so I start with flesh, and here I'm just using basic Vallejo flesh tone paint and a very fine brush, and pretty much just filling the face. I'm not worrying about any shading or texturing effects here. I just want to get his face, all the exposed skin, and maybe it catches a little of the hair and that gets overpainted later, but you're filling in all the facial features, the eyes, everything, just a single thorough coat, and a coat that completely covers the primer. Unlike later in other aspects of the figure, I will want the primer to actually show through as part of the effect. But here you get complete coverage on the face and indeed on the hands when you get to the hands as well. Now, here the figure is showing much later on because I forgot to take the picture at the next step. Because again, working from the inside out, I go ahead and put the shadows on the face. And this one is the closest to the standard figure painting technique of base color and then working your way out with washes. And so on the face, you want to get some shadow, but you don't want to look like a jack-o'-lantern. And so I just use a darker brown. I don't use black. I don't use dark brown. I just use a dab of Vallejo brown. And you can see in the little tin there, there's a dab of the paint in the center. And then over on the side is a dab of water. And I pull some of the paint into the water to thin it and get a wash. And it's better to get too thin a wash than too heavy a wash. And you pick up some of that thin wash on your brush and literally just paint over the face. Some of this is hard to see in the photograph, but you can begin to see in this guy how he's got definition there. There's a shadow underneath his cap, which is not all from the lighting. You can see how his mouth and nose have been picked out. Again, that's because a little bit of this brown wash settles into the crevices, and it naturally gives you a high spot and a low spot, and the paint settles in to the crevices. And if you've got too much paint, you can remove some while it's still wet with your brush or even with a damp cloth. One of the nice things about these water-soluble acrylics is while they remain damp, they're pretty much reversible. And so you have ability to work with it, move the wash around, remove excess wash. But again, you get the shadowing effect on the guy's face. And I'm going for the face that you remember we saw at the end of last week's presentation. No eyes. I am not going to go in and paint in whites of the eyes. I am not going to go in and paint irises. I'm just going to put some of the wash into the eye sockets, and it will settle in there, and it will give you a shadow effect in the eye socket, and that's all you need. Once you get any distance away from people, you don't see the whites of their eyes. You just see the eye sockets, like the photo we saw last week. Again, the photos are a little out of sequence here because I got too far down the road and realized I hadn't taken all the pictures I needed, but now I'm adding hair. Hair, again, is like the facial features, using pretty much unthinned paint, whatever color you want their hair to be, whether it's black or brown or reddish or gray. I just use, again, a dab of the paint over in the tin, and again, a very fine brush. It was one of the best investments I made, is I went from the cheap brush department to the expensive brush department and bought a brush called a spotter. And as you can see there, it's a tiny little brush. It's very tight. It's not fanned out, and it enables you to put very small amounts of paint just where you want. And what's happened here is you can see he's got a mustache, and that mustache is literally a little bit of brown paint applied to the mustache on the model. The model does indeed have a mustache, and so it guides you where to put the paint, and use the holder with the brace if you need it, brace one hand with the other if you need to, and just apply a very fine line to get the mustache to your liking. Again, if you don't like it, you can back it off. You can remove the paint and try again. The Vallejo paint is very forgiving. And at the same time, I turned his head, and there's a little bit of hair showing underneath the hat. So that got painted at the same time as well. Don't worry about the shirt and the apron. We'll get to how I got those effects. Now, having gotten the face, now you're going to start on the clothing. Again, you can see on these fellows on the left, they have a little bit of shirt, and the fellow on the far left has also got the tails of a bandana hanging down on his shirt. Again, these are pretty much opaque paints, not washes. Again, using the fine brush, and because there's excellent definition on these figures, you can see in left-hand photo, there's a little dab of the blue paint, and I literally just use a little bit of that paint and just fill in the shirt. And the fellow who's got the bandanas, yeah, the tails of the bandana got painted blue along with the shirt. That's just fine, because as you can see on the right, I'm going to come back, and again, with just a little dab of red paint and the spotter brush, I just pick out the tails. And this is easy. It's almost like dry brushing, because the bandana is very raised from the surface of the shirt. So if you put a very small amount of paint on your brush, almost wiping it off, and you just touch the top surface of the bandana. So it's not like you have to define the lines. You just catch the top surface, you touch it with a little bit of paint, and there you are. You'll notice in this photo that the faces have not actually been shadowed yet. Continuing on the layering effect. And now, though I'll show you a little bit more of this effect in some of the subsequent photos, this is kind of where the trick comes, and where the primer press paint gives you the highlights and depth that the figure painters create by multiple layers of paint. I create by relying on the primer coat to show through and give me highlights in places. And so here now, you've got the tin, you've got your selected color, and you're going to thin that with, I used water. I find that the water stays workable longer. If you use alcohol, it dries quickly. And so the Vallejo paint thinned into a wash, and just washing it over the selected area and letting it naturally seek the high and low spots. You can see on the figure on the right, look at his right leg, on your left-hand side, and you can see that that's not a uniform color. That what that has done is it has run into the deeper parts of the figure and has been very shallow on the higher parts of the figure, naturally giving you the shadow kind of effect we saw in the earlier photograph. Similarly, on his chest, on the coveralls, and you can also see the effect on the left-hand photograph of the leg in the front there, that it's not a uniform coating. And that's if there's one trick to this technique, it's using the paint thin and avoiding getting a uniform flat color and letting the highlight effect appear by the wash, letting some of the primer show through. And so here, more examples. I'm just beginning to color his jacket. And again, you can see on the left, the tin with a dab of paint and a dab of water, and I can drag it down and mix it to get it into the consistency of a wash. And look at the fellow on the left, and though he's obviously not all painted, you can see again up near his shoulders there below the seam that there's some primer showing through, and it gives the natural effect of a highlight. Similarly, working the way down on the pocket there, there's a light part and a dark part. Over on the blacksmith on the right, same thing is happening there. He has gotten a single coat of the wash on his apron, and so you can see that almost everywhere the gray is still showing through. And if you like that, you can stop there. I went to give it a little bit more of a coat and a little bit less of the gray highlight, but it really shows how this very simple technique is relying upon the gray primer giving you a highlighting effect. And I think this is about as far as I'm going to go this week, but this is again working on more clothing, and though the photos are a little bit out of sequence on my approach of paint the innermost first. On the right, you can again see the shirt. And again, in the tin, you can see there's a dab of paint, there's a dab of water, and then I've pulled them together into the middle and thinned them so that I've got a wash. Again, look at the shirt on the right, and you can see how the primer is showing through. Now, one thing you will want to do on this is take your time on the washes and see how that first coat, which is showing through the primer, how it looks as it dries, because it naturally, as it dries, it turns flat, and you're going to want to see what you think of that wash, and whether that's deep enough and whether you've gotten enough of the wash into the crevices to give you the deep shadow effect. And since even Vallejo, even thinned with water, still dries completely in minutes, you can apply a coat to one guy and then stick him onto the styrofoam and pick up the next guy and do the same thing and cycle through them. And by the time you've done one other figure or so, you can go back to the first guy and see if you like the amount of wash you got on him, or whether you want to give him another coat of the wash, and just don't overdo it, because the one thing you don't want is to just have a uniform opaque color, and it loses this effect of letting the primer give you the highlights on the clothing. So I'm going to stop right there. And next week I will continue finishing the clothing. I'll get on to their hats and shoes. I will also show you how I paint some of the details, like the hammer in the hand of the blacksmith, the oiler in the hand of the fireman, and also finishing your completed figure.
Anybody have
So
any
Jim,
questions?
I'll stop right there, and next week I'll finish them up.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, Jeff.
Anybody have any?
Jeff, I got a question. It's Greg. First of all, I really like your applying washes and letting the primer show through. The spotter brushes, they come from 5.0 to 20.0. What size did you like the most, or what size did you use?
You know, I just picked one out of the rack that looked about right.
Okay.
I would have to check, but I went for one that had a very small, tight point, because I wanted to get in like that mustache and so forth, that I could put just a trace of paint on there and know that it was only going to go where I was pointing at. So the most important thing, and I think this is a characteristic of spotter brushes, is that they are sharply pointed.
They are. The ones I know of, they're 5.0, 10.0, 18.0, and 20.0. I think it's just the size of the bristles, but yeah, they're
okay. Well,
very useful.
It's one of the smallest ones in the rack. They're short, and it's a very small tip, because again, it's very controllable. If you use too much of a brush, you're going to get paint where you don't want it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jeff.
Yeah,
We
sure.
really appreciate it. Look forward to hearing from you next week.
Hey, Jeff.
Thank you. Was there another question?
Yes. Jeff, this is Jeff. When the gentlemen break out the segments for reposting on YouTube this weekend, could you put the Amazon link for that hand steady rest so that we can all see it later? That
Sure.
is quite, I can see where that'd be handy for me. Thank you.
Yep. I will catch that and pass it on to the fellows so they can just add it into the material.
Jeff, I tell you what, if you'll just put it in the chat function right now, it'll automatically get in it when Earl breaks it out.
Okay, I'll look it up right now because I can find it very quickly.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Anybody else?
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you. Well, now I want to introduce a new modeler to our show, Bernd Fanghanel. I hope that is very close. He's going to talk about animation of Athearn's rotary snowplow using a DCC decoder. I've never heard of anything like this before.
Jim, I told you back when you asked about the DCC, it's not DCC. It's plain, I'm using a battery to power it, and I'll show you how I did that.
That's
Okay.
fine. I still want to hear about it because I've never seen it done. So thank you, Bernd. Bernd, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, let's get this show on the road.
Welcome to another Kingstone Model Works presentation. We join Bernie as he works on another exciting project for your viewing pleasure. Bernie, finish up that Guinness and let's get back to work, okay? Ready? And now, our Kingstone Model Works presentation. Lights, please.
I bought this kit here, I had a show a long time ago, and Aristocraft, which was a company back then that produced this HO scale rotary snowplows, back from the probably around 1800s. It is automated. It's one of those rubber band drives in reverse. The front set of wheels here would have a rubber bands on it, driving a shaft that drove the wheel. But when I purchased the kit, it didn't have didn't have any rubber bands. Somebody had lost those parts apparently, but this is basically what it looks like. This is a separate part here. That's the part that's going to get animated. This is the shroud that goes on the front of this. This is actually a steam powered one. Here you can see here the pulleys on here that drove the belt, and there was some kind of mechanism in this part right through here with a shaft apparently that made this turn. So I started out by putting a couple of, well, actually 4 strips of styrene in here and a sheet where I put on the small motor to power the wheel. So I basically mocked this up, and right here you can see I drew a line on it to know exactly where I had to mount the motor to keep this shaft straight. Get in there a little closer to that. These are the small motors. I picked these up on eBay. They are no longer available. I believe they were used in automatic wind cameras. They're very noisy. You'll hear what these things sound like toward the end. And this is the sheet I used to mount it on. There's holes right up here at the top, which take an 080 tap. So I tap the holes and then put screws in from the other side. So here it shows mounted in the plow. The bottom of this, when you put the chassis on, it'll keep this from falling out. I didn't glue that in just in case I needed to take it out. Maybe the motor burn out or you want to use another motor. All it is friction fit in here and a friction fit in the blades. This is what I use to power it. This is a LiPo battery. I put on little clips or little plugs that I got out, use what they call dip mounters. They're used to mount dip circuit boards. This is trying to remember, a magnetic relay reed switch and a magnet. And we got some wire in there wired to the motor. So this gives you a closer look at what a reed switch is. These 2 ends here and here are magnetic. And if you put a magnet near it, these will closing the circuit so the power can flow. And I'm showing this basically mounted on there. You can't mount this on because what it'll do, it'll close the contacts and it'll keep running. You actually need to space it a certain distance. So when you use another magnet, you can actually use this reed as an on and off switch. So I found the ideal distance from the magnet with these 2 pieces of styrene. Everything is glued onto the styrene. And then here's the whole works together. It's all glued on, wire up here to the battery. The other side of the battery goes to the motor. Here you can see it's mounted inside. I still haven't put the shaft in there to run it. So this is what she looks like all finished. And this is, in order to charge the battery, I went on eBay and they had a bunch of these. These are little, you can actually put a microchip in this and listen to music, obviously, with the earphones. I didn't use the earphones. I wanted to use this because it has a USB port that I could actually charge the batteries on. The battery from this is out of one of these helicopters. It's a little bit, has more of an amperage to it than the one in that the recorder or that little mute, whatever that thing is. A friend of mine worked at a store that they threw out a whole bunch of these because they didn't want them anymore or something. And he gave them to me. I wound up with about 25 to 30 of these things in a box. This is what the circuit board looks like. As you can see, it's a 60 milliohm 60 milliamp hour battery, which wasn't enough to drive the motor for any length of time. And the two terminals here, you just unsolder the battery. And I soldered some longer leads on it and soldered, I believe this was a 137 milliamp hour battery that I had in that helicopter. So this is how it works. Use the magnet, turn it on. And you use the other pole of the magnet and it turns it off. Just a few more seconds of this. You can notice how noisy those little motors are. I don't know how long the battery lasts on this. And with that, folks, that's the end of the show.
Well, that's impressive. Have you done anything else like that?
I did a crane. I motorized an Athearn crane, but the unfortunate thing, I burned out it was radio controlled, the radio controlled receiver. I hooked the battery up backwards and I let the magic smoke out. So I plan somewhere down the line. I've got some other ideas to do a couple more cranes somewhere, but who knows when I'll get to that. So any questions?
Yeah, Bernd, I like the way that you use the battery and the reed switch to activate it. Have you ever heard of those reed switches going bad?
I've never heard about it, any of them going bad. The only way they go bad is I broke one when I soldered it. I bent the wire and actually broke the glass.
Ah.
But other than that, as far as going bad, I don't think so. I don't see how they really could. I do know they've used these through the years on model railroads for detection. They would put them between the track and then have one of them a magnet on a car or something, and it would activate it. But that's about as far as I ever heard any of those magnets used for model railroading.
All right, thanks. Neat idea.
Yeah, really was. Well, Bernd, thank you so very much. I appreciate you being here this evening.
You're welcome.
All right, so now let's go to Martin Breckbiel, NMR, for his Scratchbuilding Corner. Martin, welcome.
Thanks, Jim. Let's see if we can. There we go. That looks about right. Give or take a plus or minus an aardvark. So this is what this is supposed to be, I presume, because that's what the slide tells me it is. I'm probably moderately correct on that, because I stopped, I'm not sure when, last time I was here. I don't know if it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, so I've sort of lost track of time. Not being firmly rooted in it, I sometimes don't know quite when I am. So picking up where I think we were, I have grant line windows and doors laid out on walls that were made up of glued up clapboard, because clapboard doesn't come in that wide. Even if you get the 6-inch stuff, it's still not enough. So you end up gluing up the 3.5 or 6-inch or whatever scraps you have laying about to get the height that you really need for a full O-scale 2-story or 2.5-story wall. So that's where I think we were. So, oh goody, we get to cut open the holes. Who would have thought we would have to cut open the holes to put the windows and doors in? I mean, shocking. So let's open. It's a lot easier to open up holes in clapboard before you assemble it, so you have a nice flat surface to use a utility knife with. It's generally what I'm using, a utility knife and a straight edge. And you cut open all the holes. The fun holes, of course, which are obvious, are the curved ones. These aren't too bad on the smaller ones on the side here. This is the tricky one. There's 3 of those because you have this little tiny piece of clapboard here. And I think in one of these pictures, you'll see it broke off. Just glue it back on with some carpenter's glue, but that's a little bit fragile. So yeah, so gluing all these things up, there's a lot of bracing for glue surfaces all the way around this building, and the back wall is not even on yet because I wasn't quite sure what the back wall was going to look like at the time. But you want all the openings, and I did at a consistent height as you go around the building. There's, the floor is somewhere here. Well, the windows need to be consistently above the floor a certain distance that makes sense. An attic space, well, there's a window up there. But there's lots of bracing to keep it together. It's a pretty good sized structure. Somehow I've got a toolbar right where I don't need it to be. Oh, well. There it moved. Shocking. Boy, you just have to ask for it and the toolbar moves. Who would have thought that would happen? So this is 1/8 inch by whatever on the corners. It's a little bit larger than I normally use. I'm usually using 3/32 square, but this is 1/8 because I wanted to have a little more imposing corner trim. It's a big building. And it also gives you a lot more gluing surface again. And here's the big opening for that bay window. So go around the side. Yeah, I think this is the one where I broke a little bit of the tip off. It actually doesn't matter if you break off the very fine tip because that window casting actually covers that up. So it's kind of built-in safety net. Eventually you have to cut all these excess pieces off. It's a lot of fun, turning it on its side using a razor saw or a saw blade in a Dremel. I don't recommend using the saw blade in a Dremel unless you keep a good stock of Band-Aids handy and some adhesive tape. Those things are damned dangerous. Amazed you can even buy them. So go around the other side. Everything looks fairly even. There's actually, little extra windows over here. Maybe a bathroom, maybe a staircase, what have you. Then we go around back. There's a big opening wall. There will be a wall put in here, but you can see I've got all kinds of shims and bracing in here to hold things in place. This piece here is actually in there to bring this piece out so it's actually even with the corner block. So it's all glued together with goo and CA and carpenter's glue. That's pretty rigid and stiff by the time I get to this point. And here's the back wall. Well, it's kind of strange. It looks to be pieced up out of multiple pieces of clapboard and some blank 16th inch basswood, which isn't going to be seen because that's on the interior section. There's a bump out that's going to get added. So I figured, well, rather than waste good clapboard, and also so I'd have a nice straight and flat surface to glue onto as opposed to gluing to clapboard, I've substituted in some scraps of the 16th inch basswood. This is why you keep scraps of stuff around, because when you want to scrap, you reach into your scrap box and you're all set. Okay, here's what the back wall looks like now. So we have more of these little double windows. Here's one, missing the tip out of it again. I didn't even bother to try and repair it because I've learned, the casting will cover that up. No worries. We have this piece that's been added on to the back, a little bump out, and a door over here. And there's a reason for that. Eventually we'll get to that. And there's a door, I think, on this end over. There better be a door on this end. And, well, we'll find out next week because I don't know if there's a door on that end. These are the mysteries of life, whether there's a door or not. So next time, closing in a roof and other sundries, whatever that means. I will tell you on the original kit for this, the American Model Builders kit, or with a laser art kit, the roof is a horror because whoever designed it and set it up in the laser cutter did not know three-dimensional geometry, and they cut the roof as if it were flat. And you take a flat roof and try to put bevels into it, it doesn't work, strangely enough. So fair warning, if you ever stumble across one of these kits, you're going to have to recreate the roof on your own. So if there's any questions, now's the time to scream them out.
Martin, this is Jeff. On that siding, what were the window openings were not pre-cut?
Oh, no.
So when you cut them, do you do something to protect against the siding splitting?
Not really, no. I'm using, like I said, the standard utility knife with a new blade in it against a steel ruler. It may take 3 or 4 passes before you get through, and I'll finish it up with a scalpel, but it's, no, I don't worry about it.
Okay, so I find sometimes when you, obviously cutting across the grain is fine, but sometimes when you're cutting with the grain, the material tends to want to split.
It can do that if you push, if you're pushing the, pushing a little too vigorously or too aggressively. It also depends what you're cutting against. You know, I'm cutting against a piece of 1x8 oak. That's about, I'm guessing, a foot, 14 inches long. So, you know, and again, and I'm also doing that at a slight angle so I don't catch the grain of the oak with the tip of my blade. So it's, yeah, I don't really, you know, one of those things you do carefully and slowly, you know, 3, 4 passes. If you rush it, you can split the wood. Well, if you rush it, you can also take off the end of your thumb. So, you know,
Martin, correct me if I'm wrong. When you say you're going to make 3 or 4 passes, what you really do is you kind of lay the knife on the wood. There's no pressure for the first pass.
Well, there's enough just to put a line into it. So when I go back, I'll hit the same line. I want to put a little nick into it. The first one's not that deep. The second and third or fourth, they've got some real pressure behind them.
Gotcha. But the first one is the one that it's kind of lay the knife there and breathe hard.
Yeah, but you want to make enough. You want to hit it just enough so you've caught it. You know, you've caught the you've got a groove that you can follow going forward. Because if you don't have that, you put more pressure on the second cut, then your blade wanders.
And really, it's the first cut that tends to split the wood.
Depends how hard you're pushing.
I say if you press it harder
than you push it hard, yeah, it could. But again, it's also what's, you know, having it on a good, solid, flat cutting surface. And I like a good hard, you know, people like using cutting pads. I've never liked them. I like cutting on a piece of oak. I want something that's substantial and hard, and I'm not going to, it's not going to give. I'd rather, what gives is the piece I'm cutting.
Gotcha. Anybody else have any questions for Martin? Jeff, did that answer your question?
Yes, I'm good.
Okay, then let's turn to our next presenter, Tom Farrell, who is scratch building his whole layout. Tom, welcome.
Thank you for having me again. This evening I have a scratch build, and what's unique about this evening's scratch build is I don't know how many of you know Gary Beatty is Puerto Borracho Railway, which is a whimsical Mexican-based railway. He does fantastic work, and we thought that we might exchange structures. So he's making one for me, and I'm making one for him. And we have two distinctly different modeling styles and two distinctly different railroads. Nevertheless, I'm making him something that would fit right at home on the rustic buff and old Gothic, sans the sign, and he's making me something that is typically made out of foam he carves. And so let me just go forward with this. This will be part 1 of 2. I don't speak Spanish, but I do speak German, which has no relevance here. Translated, the name of this is the Gary's Rustic Buff Beer Distributor Terminal. Terminal, I'm not even going to attempt to say that. Mine's rooted in the gritty Depression era of Pittsburgh. It's weathered wood, soot all over it, unmistakable from my modeling style. This is not the first time I've made a model for a West Coaster. For Sean Williams, I made him this kit, which I kit bashed. And for another fella, I made the Dr. I'm a Butcher Surgeon, another West Coast. It's kind of nice to do these exchange programs or get your work across the United States. This is Gary Beatty's mock-up. He always does these drawings before he does his structure. I'm going to try and get Gary to feature his structure that he's doing for me, Tommy's Porto Baracho Cantina, in a future New Tracks modeling segment. So as usual, I start off with a piece of plywood and I put in a base foundation that I begin my modeling with. This is just 1/4-inch material and aircraft grade plywood. Gary was careful to point out that his layout is relatively small, and he wanted his structure relatively small. He didn't want a large structure because he doesn't have the real estate of, for example, the Rustic, Buff, and Old Gothic. So this is approximately 2.5 inches by 4, so it is quite small. So after putting the 1/4-inch material around for my base, I use the tried and true laser cut senior moment here. What's the name of this stuff? Well, I'll think of it in a moment. When you do cut it, I take a razor saw and I cut this. Larkspur is the Monster Works is the material. I cut the tops of these so that it appears as though they're actual blocks. And that's a nice detail that you don't want to overlook when you're using these materials. Then I put a brick around the end. I like having different materials. It adds variety. So the idea is they started with this main structure and then they put additions on to the left and right of it. And I'm gluing it up against this 1/4-inch material. And there's that aircraft grade plywood. So it's not going to warp. Then I cap the brick with material. And then I painted everything black with an inexpensive craft store acrylic. Then I put in preparation of the floorboards. This is going to be a stick build. And you're going to see everything. So I was very careful to black out some things and add detail where I could. So here's the floor joists put across. I used yellow glue in this case. And we jump ahead and I built this wall. This is very similar to the Whistle Stop Saloon construction that I recently did a couple months ago. Just basically 1x6s on the wall here, and these are 2x8s. And it's just like building a house. This is a Grant Line door. This is very thin plywood here behind this. You'll see that later. Everything's stained with the Hunter Line stains, 3 different colors to get this variety. This is plywood. These are 1x6s. These are 2x6s in this case. There's that back wall. You can see the 3 different colors of the Hunter Line stain. You want variety. This isn't really high skill, it's high patience. You start at the bottom, you lay in the first piece, you lay in the second piece. You're just using a chopper or an X-Acto knife. You're pulling from multiple colors. It has a very nice texture to it. These are 2x12s on the roof. Again, you're just stick building. These are 4x4s. Another view of the floor. Again, the floor is very similar construction to the back wall. You got 3 different colors here. You're just randomly cutting these to different lengths. The reason I show the gaps is to show off that there are floor joists underneath there. You'll see when the building's all complete, you'll be able to look inside and see this detail. So it's not for naught. It has a tremendous look, and it's just patience. There's really easy to do. You just need a lot of wood and a lot of patience. Another look. I wanted to say, these are strips of styrene here. I'm going to put in a garage type door. A pull down door was the idea. So I took some styrene and I basically bent it like this, super glued it to these 4x4s. And prior to putting it in there, I painted it bright silver. I got out the nasty Flowcool paint. There's a better view. So I pre-painted these with Flowcool silver. And super glued these tips in and along this edge here for this door that you'll see. There's another view of it. These are the base colors here of the brick. I stain this with a rust. This is just simply a primer gray. Then I added the decking to the right here. I put some joists in, same style as here. This is all done in 2 days, by the way. Finished what you'll see today, half an hour before the show. There's the sliding door. We'll get a better view of that. That's just a piece of styrene that's scribed, pre-scribed. There. So just held it in there with my fingers and super glued it to the top of this. I played around with this color a little bit more with pan pastels, but I'm going to put a chain or a string on this. It'll look like a pull-down door. There's the side. These are 2x6s. These are 1x6s. I will put a board to cover the ends here. Again, 3 different colors, 100 line stain. I'll take the warp out of that. There'll be details on here. Part 2, this thing will get all finished off. Again, with my chopper, I just cut, these are 1 inch. This is 2-inch opening. This is 1 inch. With my chopper, I just cut 1 inch 1x6s. Sometimes I cut a couple short. I just super glued them on there. This thing's intentionally supposed to look decrepit and run down. There's the side. The deck is now on, or the roof is now in place. The roof joists. On the end there, I put this siding, or this corrugated siding, roofing material. It is actual metal, so I primed it with Tamiya primer. Then I painted it a base color, Tuscan red, actually. And then I went in with other acrylics over top. And then finally I dabbed it with silver to get that look. Sorry, in between, I was so rushed, I didn't take any photos. Made this sign on PowerPoint. It's just printed out, cut, put on a very thin piece of plywood, and then I outlined it with this very thin material. So 1x2s. Painted everything, all the trim red, not finished over here yet. Wanted to show a little rust coming off the sliding or the garage type door. See where I added a little silver there. Now here I've added pan pastels to tone down those colors. So I added grays and whites. I've begun doing the roof. I had to bend this plywood to look like that. I'm gonna put plywood all over the roof and then put roofing paper on the, like a tar paper on the roof. And it'll have gaps and things so you'll see the detail underneath. There's the back. See the brick, the brick's now pushed backward because I put pan pastels on it. I put pan pastels on this as well. Pushes those colors, gives them a little depth, gives it a weathered look. You can see the weathering here with the pan pastels. When I spray this, it's already been sprayed once overall prior to putting the pan pastels with dull coat. I'll spray it again with dull coat, which will knock these down a little bit. They won't be so white. Probably going to do something to this big piece of plywood. It's a rather large piece of plywood. Again, this is part one, and I haven't finished this part of the wall yet, or the roof. There's how far I've come this evening. So I may bring this door color out. I may paint that a green or something, or a different color, maybe not green, some different color to bring that out a little bit. I've got to finish this side up. There's quite a bit to do. I haven't totally figured out what I'm going to do on this side over here, but it's developing rather nicely. So thank you, and part two will be next Wednesday.
Anybody got any questions for Tom? Well, that's a great looking model, Tom. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, now I want to turn to Steve Montgomery. Steve is a builder after my own heart. He builds old kits back from the 1960s. Ambroid comes to mind. Ambroid 1 of 5,000 kits. Some of you may not remember those. I can remember building them. So Steve, thank you so much for doing this. I'm really looking forward to this. Thank you. Is Steve not here?
I'm here. Can you hear me? Okay, can you hear me now, Jim?
Yeah.
Okay. Welcome. Thank you for having me. I appreciate that.
Well, thanks for doing this. I can't thank you enough.
Well, it's something I enjoy doing. I'll tell you real quick, I started building when I was a kid. I built model ships, and which we eventually took to the backyard and set on fire in gigantic, war, filled them with tissue paper and threw matches at them. And then I got into building cars, the old AMT 3-in-1, stuff like that. Air Force, I built planes, and I came home, I got into model railroading probably about 40 years or more. And first two things I built was two Mantua engines, a Pacific and a 060. Really, that's got me into it. And then from there, I started, putting together plastic cars, and I wanted a different challenge. So I found Campbell kits, and I started building structures. And that led into building cars. I found Ambroid, the old Huff and Puff, I got a list of them, Mainline, LaBelle, and I had built probably so far somewhere over 100 cars, different cars for myself, for other people, and consignment sales, stuff like that that people wanted. So it's something I do. One thing I try to do on my cars is always put brake gear on them. Can't see it normally, but it's just an added touch. And I think there should be some pictures. Is Phil on? Yeah, Phil. Yeah, I think you showed these last week and you were talking about them. And this is on the Carroll Valley Railroad is my line. It's we call it a subsidiary of the B&O, but they really don't want us to talk about that because they're kind of embarrassed by us. So we're kind of a little short line. These cars were all scratch built. And they use red ball sides. A friend of mine gave me the sides. He says, here, do what you want. Okay. So they're all out of wood. This is all HO scale. And I have the door stuff to put on them. I just haven't got to it yet. So, but one of these days I'll upgrade those to with the door hardware. And then the next one is, I think, let's see. Yeah, there they are. Okay, these are Southern all-door boxcars. These are Ambroid. I built 3 of these all together, 1 for myself and 2 for friends. The gentleman, if you've heard of him, is senior moment myself too. Bob Lawson. If anybody's heard of Bob Lawson, he has the Southern Railroad. Phenomenal modeler. Well, he worked for the Southern and he helped design these cars. So I ended up building them and gave him 1. They didn't last real long because over on the end you had like a crank wheel that you would run the doors up, and the mechanism needed constant attention. So eventually got to where the dock workers would just run a fork truck into them and raise the door that way. So they weren't real successful, unfortunately, but they're a neat car. There again, they're all wood. And then Phil, the next one.
Are they scratch built? See?
No, those are kits. Those are Ambroid.
Okay.
The all door, those are the Ambroid. The 3 reefers were scratch. These are Ambroid cars.
Got it.
Okay, that is an Ambroid Boston and Maine snowplow that I built. Quite a challenge trying to get that the curvature in that wood. But that's our main snowplow for the 2 inches of snow that we get up here anymore. So, I know you guys commented on the engines last week. The 2 engines on there are United brass 280s, a 280, and I believe the second one is a 210. But that's our big snowplow. That replaced the one that I scratch built. And maybe next week I'll show you a picture of that. But I just used a little tender, built myself a little snowplow, and then I've got this one there to show. And I said, oh yeah, we're going to upgrade that. Okay. And most of these, like this one, that is Hunter line stain on that too. I use a lot of Hunter line. And then the next one, okay, that is an Ambroid helium car. And if you build it by the directions, it's okay, but I actually made tubes for the whole thing. It's all tubes. And there's one at the bottom. You cannot see it. It has a double brake system on it, and I made it heavy. If you notice up on top, the roof boards, I left them in a natural color because I've read that a lot of time after they painted the cars to begin with, they let the boards go natural because they could find the cracks and the breaks in them easier than when they were painted. At least that's what I read. So I do that to a lot of my cars. And I have built, let's see, I built 2 of those. And the next one, Phil, okay. These are Ambroid hogshead cars, tobacco hogsheads. And this is a group that I built that has 4 of them, had the plug doors. The top car is a roll-up door, like a garage door. If you guys are familiar with that, again, a friend of mine helped design those, and they work great. Well, they had to kind of tinker with them, but they were very long, like 89 foot long. And they replaced the roll-up doors with the plug doors. And they eventually found use down in Kentucky hauling hay and feed. But they were very long at the time. I have built a total of 7 of those. I told myself I'll never build another one because just in the roof alone, they have, when you see the top one does have a roof walk. When they redid them with the bulkhead doors, then they took the grab irons off the sides so you couldn't get up there anyway. But there's 121 pieces of cut wood just in a roof alone on that car.
Jeez.
Yeah. And the underneath is fully detailed, and I have brake systems on all of them too. So probably won't. I have another kit in my cabinet. I doubt if I'm going to build it. I think 7's enough of those things. But they are nice. Okay, next one. Okay, that was built last year. That is my Android pickle car. And again, it's with brake gear and all. Then I basically built it the way the kit that came in the kit. I didn't make too many changes on that one. In fact, I don't think I made any changes on that. I wish their lettering was a little bit better, but then, like you said, Jim, these cars are from the 60s.
Yep.
And that's what they were. All righty.
That was a fun car. I built one of those though.
Yeah, they're neat. That one is a let's see. Okay, the photograph car. That is I think you guys said last week maybe a Grant line. It's not. That's all wood. And that is a BC Models photography car from the 1800s that is based on a real car. I've seen pictures of the real car. And it's pretty simple build, really. There's not much to it. The sides are pre-printed, and just throw it together. But it comes out it's a nice looking car. So I do have a guy with a camera and all that I can stage with that sometimes too, just to get a picture. So, okay, let's see, that is a Binkley. Yeah, Binkley kit. Remember those?
No.
They were old. That's a metal. The car itself is metal. I put new wood ends on top of it there because the ones that they had were not very good. So I redid that. It came with the load. And I just added the rings on top of it. It does lift out of there completely. And that's a nice car. I like what I built. I'm sorry, excuse me. The guys around this area, one of them Ed Swain had built a high and wide train. He's got about like 5 cars, specialized equipment. So I decided I wanted one. So I built my own high and heavy. So I have a bunch of these well cars and heavy duty flat cars. And we've got heavy loads on them and all. It's just something that we're doing around here. If one guy does it, the rest of us end up copying. So, and him and Bob are one of my, those guys are my mentors. So I learned from them. And the next one. Okay, again, Bob helped design this, the first 3-tiered auto car for the Southern Railroad. He helped design it. A fun story is they put him and another guy out in Michigan. They put him up in that front car, which would be the black car, and they rode in that car down through Cincinnati, down through the Rat Hole Division to Chattanooga. And that's full of tunnels. And Bob told me every time they come to a tunnel, him and that guy'd hit the floor. Just really weird, but he got to do that. It's kind of a funny story. So I built that, but I put B&O on it because I didn't have any Southern decals at the time. So again, that's why I can't run that on my layout, but I've always wanted one of those. And again, that's all wood. That is a quality craft, I believe it is. Where's that rascal at? Let me see here. Pretty sure that's quality. Yeah, that's a quality craft car, all wood. And the next one, Phil. Okay, these are, the one on the right is an Android poultry car. And the one on the left is a scratch-built poultry car that I built. I built the one on the right for a friend. I wanted one, so I built the one on the left. And one of these days I may go back and redo that or make a whole new one on it. But I think I copied it pretty closely. And again, those are, the one is Android, the one on the left is scratch built. Of course, all brake detail and all on them too. Okay. Well, that's me. Do we have more pictures or not? Maybe not.
That's it for tonight.
Was
Yeah.
that it tonight? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll
And,
catch the rest of them next week.
yeah, I'll send you some more. And I was going to tell Brian, you were talking about that, his snowplow.
Yeah.
I found a M. Dale, which was the, he was the owner of Red Ball. He started Red Ball, and I have his rotary snowplow. I actually put DCC in it. It runs.
I'd love to see that. You want to do it next week?
I can do that. I can show it to you real quick, but
No, we don't have time tonight, but how about
not
next
tonight.
week? Yeah, but how about next week?
That'd be fine. That'd be fine.
Fantastic.
Okay.
All right, so Steve Montgomery is going to do, next week, you're going to continue this, and you're going to do the snowplow.
Yep. Now, wooden car kits, Jim, is not all I do. I do structures. I do, resin cars and Walthers, metal passenger car. I have a business car that I built, HO, full interior. I found the O scale, Walthers. I built it full interior, so I have a matching set.
Well, then why don't we get you scheduled to come on the show and show some of those? Because I'd love to see them.
Okay. Yeah.
All right.
Be glad to. I appreciate y'all having me on here.
Oh, listen, absolutely. Anybody got any questions for Steve? Steve, thanks so much for doing this. We'll see you next week.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Well, now we go to another Steve, Steve Sherrill. What do you want to talk about, Steve?
Well, I want to talk about last weekend. I had an open house. I was part of the Mainline Hobby open house that they have annually. And there were 39 layouts on that tour. And I had the usual get ready to have an open house, clean the room, find stuff you haven't seen since the last open house, get rid of stuff, and of course, charge my batteries up. I had my plan for all that. So I was all ready to go. So here it comes the night before. And I had trouble with my fluorescent lights. I had one light that was kind of flashing. And so I called my son-in-law and I said, he's a master electrician. I said, you got to come up here and do something with these ballasts. So, people don't get hemorrhaging and stuff like that during the open house. So he came up at 6:30 in the morning, fixed it, and so I was ready to go. So there were three of us in this area, and this was the first time that the southern part here in West Virginia had open house, and the three of us that are about 5 miles apart between each of us. So it kind of made it worthwhile for the people who were coming to visit the railroads. I had over 25 people, and one from England that was just a fantastic visitor. I was by myself, so I really didn't have an opportunity to run many trains because you have to watch them, you know, make sure you don't run into through the turntables and things like that at the end of the line. And I couldn't get any visitors to run the trains. I don't know, they're really hesitant to run battery-powered locomotives for some reason. I don't know what the problem is. But anyway, during the open house, I observed some things that I would do again and some that I would not do again in building a model railroad. I noticed that I have some narrow aisles, but when I built the railroad 25 years ago, I was kind of smaller, you know, and it wasn't a problem, two people passing each other. But as time goes on and, you know, I'm pretty prosperous, I grew a little bit. And so did a lot of other visitors. So that was one of the problems I found that in the future, I would recommend people making the aisles at least 36 inches wide. Again, I want to go to LED lights, just to light the layout better. That's some of the things I would do. And so maybe I wouldn't make the layout as big. I always wonder, do people who are building a railroad or have built a railroad have the same type of questions about what they did when they first built the railroad as opposed to what they would do now? You know, DCC has opened up a lot of things. Battery has enabled us to eliminate wiring. You know, as things have modernized in model railroading, it's allowed us to actually be a lot more flexible, I think, in the design of our railroads. So I don't know if any of the people on New Tracks tonight want to share any of the things that they have discovered since they built the railroad that they would not do again. And this is probably, I'm talking about the current railroad that's up, or for instance, we'll go for Tom. I always go to Tom. In the previous railroad you had, Tom, I know you tore it down because you moved. Did you design something different that you, from lessons learned from the previous railroad, to improve your operations and things like that? And where did you get your ideas from?
Well, yeah, the previous Rustic, Buff, and Old Gothic had some design flaws. First off, I made a mistake. The return loops were over a 36-inch, approximately 42-inch reach. So if I had a derailment in the back of a return loop, I had to perform, you know, I had to get on a step stool and lean over. And so when I designed the new layout, basically I limited everything to a 24-inch reach. One area I may have a 30-inch reach. So that was one issue that I said I wouldn't do that.
Tom, was that the difficulty in reach because you raised the height of the railroad?
Well, I think about most you can comfortably, you know, my layout's about 50 inches high, 52 inches high. And you just really can't, without standing on something and performing calisthenics, get back there. So I just was careful that I maintained a 24-inch to 30-inch reach on a walk-around type layout this time. And the second was that I jumped around from backdrop to bench work to track work. This time, everything was performed in a logical order. I completed all the bench work. Then I completed all the backdrop work, then all the wiring. Then I began with the pink foam sitting on top of the bench work. where before I jump around to the left and right hand side of the layout. Everything was just chaos. And lastly, the wiring. The last layout was principally an analog layout. And I know you're a dead track guy, but I wanted the most sophisticated DCC system I could get my hands on. Even though I didn't know a thing about DCC, I wanted to learn about it. So I implemented a DCC layout this time, and I'm glad I did. So basically, the three things I learned was complete everything in a logical order. Do the DCC's much simpler wiring than the old analog, and make sure you have the ability to reach all access points on the layout. So yeah, I learned quite a bit. And on the design, no, I didn't really. The last layout, I sort of emulated a John Armstrong concept. But this time, this is my 7th layout. Just to be frank, I didn't need any help. So, yeah.
Now, for your backdrops, I went from the masonite backdrop to linoleum, and the corners, you know, are curved. They're not. They don't go into a regular 90-degree corner. That was a job putting that up. Well worth it. Of course, when I take the layout down, I don't know what it's gonna look like, you know, because you only had what I think it was 8 feet wide, and they actually cut it in half. So I had 4 feet of that linoleum. Would I do that again? Probably not.
I used
probably not do that again.
I used masonite on both layouts, but I used a different material. I used backdrop warehouse the first time around, and they were basically big photographic paper. And if you got paint, plaster, or scenic materials on the backdrop warehouse photo, it damaged it. And this time I used something called railroad backdrops, which is like it's like a plastic Mylar. I don't know what the hell it is, but it's basically you can't hurt it. If you put plaster or paint on it, it wipes right off. And so I upgraded the backdrops. That made a huge difference. You know, if you put Sculptamold or get plaster on it, the old one, you basically ruined it. This one is impervious. And it's not porous.
Yeah. Now for your rock molds, you usually mold some, correct?
I have not, I will. I have a complete collection of Woodland Scenics rock molds. I must have a dozen of them.
I've got a lot of rock molds also. I've used #1 casting plaster in this one this time. Really takes the colors nice. I got it at a brick place where they make bricks and they do that kind of thing. So it's relatively inexpensive, but the bags are a 100-pound bag. And it's really hard to deal with to break down that 100-pound bag. But you know,
the trick is when you use those Woodland Scenics or anybody's commercial rock molds, is not to use them as is. I mean, frequently Phil and I just did layout tours in Pittsburgh, and I could see the Woodland Scenics rock molds. You know, I could point, I know that one, I know that one, and that. The trick is not to use them like that. Break them up, break them in half once they're cast, mix them up. There's an art. When I get to that, I'll do a demonstration on how to do that so they don't look like everybody else's rock molds. Yeah.
Pat, you use a lot of rock molds on your railroad, right?
Yes, I did.
What did you use? Casting plaster, or what'd you use?
I used plaster, dental plaster, and the regular plaster.
Okay, so you
from Bragdon Enterprise.
Yeah, those Bragdon molds were excellent because they were big and they covered a lot of area.
Yes, and what I did, one secret I did was take a lot of the plaster molds and used them and broke them up. I didn't use like one whole sheet of the plaster. I would break up pieces and then rejoin them again on the backdrop or on the mountain. And
Yeah,
then I'd fill it in with stipple, or what do you call it? It almost looks like plaster, but it's stuff for filling holes and stuff. It worked out really
yeah,
good.
yeah. And with those molds, if you use them, I think they're 18 inches wide, aren't they?
Yeah,
Like
there's
12
some
feet.
he had some very large ones, which I
Yeah,
got a couple, three of them. And then he had some smaller ones, which I purchased also. And they're very, very well detailed. I mean, they weren't like I noticed in Woodland Scenics, I had a few of them. They're deeper,
yeah,
but the
yeah,
ones from Raglan were shallower, so it didn't take much to plaster to lay it out. And it was easy to break them up and join them all together. And there was a real trick to it, joining them together. I made sure that the rock patterns run in the same direction. If you put one pattern on and you put one upside down, you'll notice it right away when you look at your mountain.
yeah, yeah. You can't do that.
No,
You know,
no.
I kind of moved them back. You know, I'd have like put a mold and move the ledge, get a ledge, and
Yeah.
kind of do that. You know, kind of break them back a little bit.
Mhm.
So I've got some nice rocks on my railroad. I might show a picture of those once in a while, you know, sometime. But has anybody else got anything they want to comment here? Fred, Fred Cosgrove? No? Yeah. Anything you do a little different on your railroad to enhance, or?
What, me or
No,
Tom?
Pardon me? There
I
was another
took and moved to a different house. And the biggest thing I did for the change was enlarge the railroad from the other location and eliminated a upper level. I had O scale on the lower level and HO on the upper level. And that's a pain to get to it because you have to lower the one to have access to the other one. So when I moved into the new house, I separated the two layouts. Large the O scale layout. I haven't done the HO yet, but I wanted to work on the floor before I anchored those sections down. So
you got a 2-level layout, one level and different scales.
Yes.
Wow, that's different.
Yeah, well, I had O scale stuff, I had HO, so I wanted to be able to operate both of them. And that was the only way that I had space to do it. So it was actually a good idea at the time. But like I said, once I got into a larger house, I was able to separate the two and keep everything on one level, which I much happier with.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's 2-level layouts. I get confused when I look at them. I can't figure out what's what. And the lower level is, it seemed like the scenery just doesn't, I just have trouble following it. You know, after having what I consider a large railroad, I don't think that's the way to go. Especially if you're by yourself and don't have people over all the time to run. You know, you have to keep it in moderation. But you know, sometimes these things get out of hand and you just keep adding and adding. And I think that's kind of what happened to me. I thought the big railroad was the way to go, but I'm not so sure anymore. You know, with battery, you don't have to worry about cleaning track. You don't have to worry about anything with wiring going bad except in the locomotives. So that, you know, that's eliminated, but you do have to, you have to be able to solder and hook up the wires, you know, and deal with that. But railroads are a lot of fun. I enjoy it, especially the one I'm doing, this little ON18 stuff. It's really kind of cute and neat, and you don't need a lot of room. So, you know, that's where I'm headed, smaller, I think. But this is such a great hobby. I, you know, I know that Gary Sherrill, as a master model railroader, are you there, Gary?
I'm here.
Okay. Tell me what you would do over again if you were going to build another railroad. What have you learned in, you know, the amount of time that you've had the railroad that you've got right now?
It's like Tom said, I have two areas on the layout that are very hard to get at. And that was one of my biggest mistakes, was going too wide in two areas. If I was to build another one, I'd build it so I had that 24-inch reach instead of, I have a 5.5-inch reach, which on my layout is very difficult to get at.
Do you like a shelf type of railroad?
No, it's a 5.5 wide at both ends of the dog leg, and narrows down to 4 feet across, which goes all the way around in a C shape. And as I say, at the both ends of the dog leg, that's 5.5. That's a large reach. I do have where the farm pops out. I can get into that section, but in the yard where the turntable and that is, that's my worst area. If I have a derailment, I use one of those long picker things that can pick up items, and I can move cars out. But to get in there, service switches and that, it's very difficult.
Well, at my open house, I was surprised because I asked the visitors, you know, how big was your railroad? Because I wanted to know. And a lot of them had smaller railroads. I was kind of surprised that they were still in like 4x8s, and they were enjoying the hobby, you know, with small size railroads. Which, you know, my comment was, well, we all always started that way, you know, from 4x8s or 4x6s or something like that. But I was really surprised that, and these people had modeled for a while, but it was just interesting to talk to visitors to your railroad and try to see exactly where they are in model railroading.
Steve?
Yeah.
One thing that I've come to appreciate on my new rustic buff railroad compared to the old, you know, the old one, I was working at the time, but it was 15 years in the making. This new one, you know, I've been working on it steadily for 2 years. It's just the enormous amount of time things take to super detail a layout. You know, I spent 8 months on that shanty town, and you could say that it's still not, I mean, a railroad's never complete, but there's still things that I know I need to do on there, and I have 8 months of work into it. So when you consider, in my case, my layout's 35 feet by 14, there's a lot of years ahead in the build. I think people underestimate how much time these large layouts take. You know, like a Howard Zane or an Al Judy's layout was quite large. You know, just they take time, you know.
Yes. Yeah, they do. Howard Zane's is just overwhelming. It's just overwhelming.
Phil and I looked at some marvelous layouts in Pittsburgh, and you know, one of them, I mean, just enormous. You know, I don't know how many years this fellow must have had in this. You know, I guess that's the idea, though. You know, it's not to see how quickly. It's all about the build. You know?
Well, but I think people who have these real large layouts, they actually have a lot of people come in and help them. You know, that may be a club type atmosphere in a private home, you know, where people come over on Wednesday night and they work on the railroad. And that's great. but
Unless you
those
know.
people have to be able to model at the same level that you are, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, this
But-
is Burr Stewart, and I have one of those home layouts that's big enough that a bunch of people come over every week and help me with it. And I'm getting a little frustrated because I'm not doing any modeling anymore. I'm managing people and what they want to work on, and it's really great having a bunch of friends, and it's all really good stuff. But I think a couple people have mentioned this before, but what happened to me was I didn't really know what I was modeling. I mean, when I started, I went from the main town to the next town, and then I went to the next town after that. And I finally got to a town that had a couple branch lines going off it and a 5-track yard. I was modeling the prototype. And I built this 5-track yard with the 2 branches going off to the side, and I started thinking, you know, this would make a great model railroad right here. Why do I have the whole rest of the basement? You know, with all these other yards and towns. You just run from staging into a 5-track yard with a couple branch lines, and you can just have all kinds of operating fun.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just think a couple people mentioned you get ambitious about the scope without realizing you don't need that much railroad to have a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And the other thing I wanted to mention that I'm finding that I wish I had done differently is, you know, we're always joking about negotiating space for the railroad, but my problem is space for the empty boxes for all the rolling stock and all the 2,000 magazines that I have from all these different magazines I've collected over the years and read every one of them. And yeah, sure, I could throw them all out, I suppose, but I'm just sort of overwhelmed by the amount of cube that isn't the model railroad that I need to manage. And I'd never thought about that before. I mean, when I started, if I was starting again, I'd say, okay, wait, I'm going to have half the basement be dedicated to the railroad and the other half dedicated to a whole bunch of storage shelves and, you know, tooling and supplies. And you don't really think about that. I mean, if you're building a factory, you think about it because you can't manufacture stuff without parts and inventory. But I never really thought about that when I just started building the railroad, and the basement filled up with junk very quickly just from the whole household. And then I didn't have any space for all that stuff.
Do you have a lounge? Do you have a lounge in your base by your railroad?
Well, you know, that's a funny story too, because originally we wanted to have a ping pong table down there. So I didn't invade the space for the ping pong table with the layout. And then later we got rid of the ping pong table because I started having operating sessions. So now I have a big space in the middle of the layout with a small table and a bunch of chairs so people can hang out. And it's not a lounge off to the side. It's just the center of the layout is open for visitors and operators.
Yeah.
And that, you know, that's kind of like, what's his name in Kansas City had that sort of a big open area. The guy who modeled the Santa Fe, who am I trying to think of? Anyway,
well,
the thing is, if you have a lounge off to the side, then everybody who's in there is missing all the action. So when we lounge around, we're all getting to see the trains. We're all rail fanning the whole time we're sitting there.
Well, one of the things that I wish that I had not taken away was my bathroom. I have a separate building. I wish that I had left that bathroom in that building.
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
You know, I think that's important so you don't, you know, people don't go through the house to use, you know, I mean, you know, your wife you know, my wife never got really upset, but, you know, some of them do, you know, they're always coming through the house and messing up and doing this, that kind of thing. And so, you know, if you have a facility near the layout, it just kind of makes it a little more, you know, comfortable.
I couldn't agree more with that because we had a basement and we had a bathroom in the, didn't have a shower. We had a half bath, And I'm telling you, it was the greatest asset that we had with the railroad down there.
If I were designing a place, I would definitely have a bathroom nearby.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Really. And the ideal thing is to have a couch or some chairs or something where you can have a drink, and sit. So that doesn't go on the railroad. Some people put all kinds of stuff on the railroad to lean on the railroad, that kind of thing. But I mean, there's things that we do when we're building a railroad that we find out later, hey, that was a big mistake, but now I got to live with it. Or I have to make a heck of a change in something to eliminate that problem.
Well, I'm afraid we're going to have to shut this down for tonight, Steve, and continue it next week. How's that?
Okay, we could do it.
One of the things that I found as I got older, particularly after I retired, I got more involved in modeling than I did running the railroad. And running the railroad, for some reason, for me, just became a second pastime because I really enjoy just going out, turning on the radio, and building something.
Mm-hmm. So I am.
Yes. I mean, everybody has ups and downs in model railroading. I mean, as far as your interest levels, that's why we go to a train show to get, to get that peak back again, or we'll build a kit, or we, go to a friend's house or something like that. I mean, that's just natural.
Or in your case, you could learn to solder.
Yes.
Well, listen, thank you so much, Steve. I appreciate it. We'll see you next week. Well, that seems to be our show for this evening. Thank you so much for being here. And Phil, Pat, if we could do the caboose, please. Well, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I hope you had a good time. I hope you enjoyed the show. Most importantly, I hope you learned something. That's what it's all about. Till next Wednesday, happy modeling. Thanks again for coming.